Okay, well, it looks like it's 5 after, so want to officially say welcome to today's webinar, Fresh Solutions for Flexible Workplaces, brought to you by Get There Oregon and partners, including Metro and Westside Transportation Alliance. Again, just a reminder that if you haven't already, there's a poll available, so we'd ask you to complete those questions. The pandemic has has challenged many ingrained assumptions about work, including where, when, and how we work, with remote work becoming normalized on a mass scale for many people. Hybrid flexible work is now a top desired benefit among workers, greatly impacting talent recruitment and retention for employers amid today's acute workforce shortages. A major consideration behind workforce demand for remote work is lessening painful commutes, which were already getting worse pre-COVID and now can be even more painful with gas prices up above $5 a gallon. Today, we've brought together leadership from 3 major Portland area employers to discuss how best to create sustained, high-performance hybrid work environments when a one-size-fits-all solution isn't practical or even possible. Plus, we'll explore what tools and resources are available to employers adopting flexible workplace policies. So, first off, just to introduce myself, my name is Jeff Pazdalski, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I'm also the Executive Director of Westside Transportation Alliance, or WTA. Westside Transportation Alliance is a local nonprofit that provides employers and employees with commute options, solutions, and services. And I'm really excited that today's panel features representatives from 3 WTA partner organizations. So just a little bit of kind of orientation on the webinar and some kind of house rules to make sure everybody has the best possible experience. Closed captions and Spanish translations are both available, and you can see directions for those on the screen now. If you have any technical difficulties with anything, please use the chat feature to let the hosts know, and we can get that resolved. And if you have questions for the panelists during the session, please put them in the Q&A session. There will be some time at the end to make sure the panelists have a chance to answer those questions. And the webinar is being recorded. So let's look at the poll results. Here we are. So the first question was, imagine 2024, the health crises are over, gas prices are down, and do you think more people at your company are going to be working remotely or in a hybrid model than pre-pandemic? And I think the resounding answer there was yes. 98% of folks thought so. On a company level, it looks like folks think that the shift to a hybrid remote kind of model has been an overall positive. 54% thought that. So that's I think a good thing. Not many people felt that that's a negative. And then the personal level, the best thing about remote and hybrid work is that increased flexibility to take care of personal and family obligations. And yeah, certainly being able to reallocate that time that had been spent commuting or in that kind of in-office exclusive setup has certainly, I think, been appreciated by many. And so thanks for those that participated in the survey. I think a lot of those answers tie in really nicely with some of the questions and topics that we'll be discussing today. So to really kind of get us going here, joining us today on the panel are three experts who have been at the forefront of tackling the challenges that have been posed by hybrid work, as well as taking advantage of opportunities like boosting employee recruitment and engagement. I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves in a little more detail in a moment, but I'll kick things off by just doing a quick introduction to who our panelists are today. So first, I'd like to introduce Cassie Buckroyd, Senior Manager of Total Rewards Experience at Columbia Sportswear Company. Cassie has worked at Columbia Sportswear for 8 years and started there as the company's first wellness program manager. Next, we'll be joined by Eric LaPrette, Sustainability Education Coordinator at Washington County. Eric is part of a team that leads work with Washington County staff and community partners on sustainability topics, including energy efficiency, environmental justice, and transportation options. And then our third panelist today is Dave Vernier, founder of Vernier Software and Technology, a company that just celebrated their 40th anniversary. In that time, the company has been named one of the best 100 places to work in Oregon over 20 times and has been named the best green workplace every year since that competition started. So with that as our starting point, I think I'll stop talking and let each of the panelists introduce themselves in a little more detail and talk about their professional roles, as well as describing their company's workforce, including the number of people that are employed, where they work, and the type of jobs performed. So maybe we'll kick this off with Cassie.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm Cassie Buckroyd again. I work for Columbia Sportswear Company, headquartered here in Portland. I lead a team right now in Total Rewards, and we are responsible for delivering Total Rewards programs across our global workforce. So for all of you non-HR people, Total Rewards is compensation, benefits, wellness, leave of absence, all of those employee programs. And so my team partners with the business to deliver those programs in a really impactful way. I myself am a hybrid employee. I come to the office 3 days a week, and I'm here right now and work from home 2 days a week. Columbia has 8,000 employees globally. 5,000 of those employees are here in the US. And as I mentioned, we have our corporate headquarters here in Portland with about 1,200 employees. And then we have various brand headquarters that are down in California and Carlsbad and Richmond, California, and another headquarter downtown here in Portland, Sorrel. So I'd say all in all, our headquarter here in Portland, that's probably around 1,200 employees. And then the other locations, probably about 300 employees in total. And then we also have, I don't know how many retail stores now, probably over 150 retail stores across the United States in 49 states. And so those are mostly hourly workers, retail associates, shift workers, things of that nature. And then we have 2 distribution centers in the US. One is here in Portland, in North Portland, off of Marine Drive. We have about, I think, it fluctuates with season, but anywhere from 300 to 500 employees there. And then another distribution center in Robards, Kentucky. Those employees are responsible for getting our orders out the door in a nutshell. So they are working in a kind of a productivity, hourly workers, shift workers, things of that nature. And then we have a small remote workforce that is made up of salespeople and showrooms and things like that. And those are a mix of working from home and working in our showrooms.
Great, thanks, Cassie. Eric, maybe turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Laprete. I'm the Sustainability Education Coordinator at Washington County. I use he, him pronouns. I work in the Sustainability Division, and my role there is to engage county employees on sustainability by providing trainings and putting on events and putting out publications with the overall goal to support sustainability's work to improve the sustainability of county operations. I also coordinate an organization called Partners for a Sustainable Washington County Community, or PSWCC, which is a regional coalition of public agencies in sort of the region of Washington County who collaborate on sustainability work. Washington County as an organization has 2,300 employees, and we work at more than 30 different locations all over the county, with our main offices being located in downtown Hillsborough. Most of those locations are in urban centers, but some of them are also in residential and even rural locations. About 40%-ish of our county workforce needs to be on site every day to conduct their work, which means that the remaining 60% have some more flexibility for remote work options. And the types of work that we do here at the county, we have some community facing roles in places such as public safety, community corrections, public health, elections, assessment, taxation, land use planning, road maintenance, housing, parks and libraries. The list goes on, as well as some internally facing positions as well for the county business, such as finance, facilities, ITS, fleet, and sustainability. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Eric, and we'll turn it over to Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Vernier. I'm Vernier Software Technology. We're a long time supporter of West Side Transportation Alliance. I was on the board and stuff. We're a much smaller company. We're about 110 people, and we're very changed now. It was a couple years, 2.5 years ago, we had almost all those 110 people were coming to work every day. And we have a real mix of people, everybody from, we probably have about 22 software developers. We have some hardware engineers. We have marketing people. We have what we call tech support, research and development people, mostly former teachers who teach, work with teachers. We make products for science teachers. So it's hardware and sensors, and then we have to write software to support those sensors. We write apps, and then we write books of labs to go with it. So there's a whole lot of pieces. So about 2/3 of the company is let's say, flexible. They can conceivably work from home, and about another third do things like test products and put things in boxes and do the shipping and keep the building running. So I'd say we're about 2/3 who are able to be hybrid, and now pretty much are. So we've been around a long time. What else can I say? I think that I've covered most of the things.
Great, thanks. We'll move here to the next question. So the pandemic challenged many of the assumptions previously held about work, and has obviously normalized remote work for many employees. So a couple of questions related to that that you can consider for your answers. How have work practices and performance improved since the mass shift to remote work for many employees that started in 2020? And what parts of remote work practices do you think will continue in the long term? Dave, maybe we'll start this one off with you.
Well, first of all, I think the world has changed and will never go back to the way it was. I think that's pretty clear. We're very concerned about the environment, and you can't deny that our carbon footprint is much lower because of the pandemic, and so many people are not commuting like they were. Those are all good things. There's a lot of good things there. I'm an old guy, and I loved our company culture before, where we we used to have a sports activity every lunch hour, a volleyball game or a basketball game or a soccer game, and we used to have yoga classes and Zumba classes and lots of parties. And so I miss a lot of that stuff, which we can't do anymore. We're trying to get it back a little bit, but it'll be on a much lower level where maybe the people who like to play soccer come in on the second Wednesday of the month and they have a soccer game. So I definitely see the pros and cons of this, and I bet other people do too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that, Dave. That it's been some good and bad of the mix. So Cassie, how about any thoughts from you on this?
Yeah, sure. So when I'm speaking about our employees who have the flexibility to work remotely, I'm really talking about our office workers. We have the employees that I mentioned who are in our retail stores and our distribution centers. Those are on-site jobs that they're in person for. They've been working throughout on-site and during the entire pandemic. So I just want to make that clear that I'm talking about, mostly headquarter employees. It's funny listening to Dave talk about his culture. It reminds me of Columbia's culture. Prior to the pandemic, we had a really in-person culture. Really, my role, especially when I was running the wellness program, was to make coming to work enjoyable. So fitness classes, parties, volleyball on the lunch hour, all that stuff. And we do have a really special, fun culture that I also miss quite a bit, having been here for 8 years. I think that, that we definitely heard, from mostly from like our talent acquisition teams and recruiting teams that, remote work was something that candidates were asking for and wanting even prior to the pandemic, but it just wasn't a part of our culture. So we didn't really have that as an option, although we were starting to explore that and create a policy around flexible work prior to the pandemic. And then of course, the pandemic just accelerated that. Obviously we were forced into remote work, which was a little bit painful. And so I think, we've successfully shifted into this, pretty successfully. It's, still work to be done into this, hybrid environment. And the first year, 2020, was a rough year, as I think, for a lot of companies, it was a rough year. But 2021 was the best year that we've had on record for the company. And I can't, you can't attribute that to one single thing, but it's hard to say that, flexible work and remote work had a negative impact on the company. It truly, we've been thriving since around 2021. So yeah, I think that we'll continue to, offer this as an option. I think, now that we're shifting back into coming into work, we're really letting employees decide what they want to do. So they can be locally remote and work from home. They can come in and be hybrid. They can come in all the time if they want. And so we've just got a whole assortment of things that people are doing. And that's an adjustment to try to figure out, how to collaborate and meet and do all of that. And I can share more about that later. But I do think that this will continue, and we'll just continue to refine, what it is like to have work in this hybrid environment.
Great, thanks, Cassie. That's good information, and good to hear that Columbia Sportswear has been thriving in 2021 and into the current year. Eric, any turn it over to you for this question?
Yeah, so I guess in comparison to Dave and Cassie, I'm kind of the newbie on the panel. I got hired at the county right kind of at the start of the pandemic. And so I never really got that taste of what it was like in the before times, which I've noticed for the folks who were there in the before times, that transition was pretty hard. But for me and for other folks who got hired during the pandemic, it's like, well, this is all we've ever known. So let's sort of take this opportunity and run with it. And I think the county's done a really great job overall at transitioning from what used to be almost entirely in-person based service provision of services to a whole lot of online stuff. So an example of that would be like the bidding process. We put out millions of dollars worth of contracts every year. And if you were a business that was based in Portland or Gresham or Tigard, you had to come in physically to the downtown Hillsborough office with a stack of papers this big that you might not even get, your bid approved. And that's like such a waste of time and such a waste of paper and resources. And we were able to say, okay, well, we can't have physical touch right now. Let's move this online. So now we have a completely online bidding process, and there's just examples of that throughout the operations that have just really streamlined things and make the services that we provide way easier. It's also really helped with our community engagement. If we wanted to get public input on a road or something like that, we had to hold in-person meetings. People had to find ways to get to those meetings. They had to figure out ways to get childcare and things like that so that they could attend. And now all of our public engagement activities, including our board meetings and things like that, have remote options. So folks can tune in from wherever they're at. And so we've seen, so many benefits from this that the county has actually codified 2 policies. We have a flexible work schedules policy and a remote work policy that allow all of our employees to permanently do some sort of hybrid or remote work. We leave the decision about sort of what that looks like up to each team. There are obviously some folks at the county, exactly like what Cassie was saying, who cannot work remote, like our sheriff's patrol deputies, for example. You can't do patrol on Zoom, but there are folks that do have that opportunity, and we gave them the sort of the policy framework to be able to do that.
Great, thanks, Eric. Let's move on to the next question here. There's no one size fits all hybrid work approach, since organizational cultures and demands differ from company to company and even from work site to work site. So again, a couple of questions to think about for your answer. What's driving your organization's decision to offer flexible work arrangements to employees? And what critical focus areas do you think employers should be sure to cover when they're shaping new hybrid work models and arrangements? So Eric, maybe we'll lead this one off with you.
All right. So in terms of what is driving Washington County's decisions to offer flexible work arrangements and things like that to employees, one of them is, especially since the murder of George Floyd in 2020, we've had an institutional push for equity. And we recognize that going into the office is not equally possible or equally easy for all of our employees. So to be able to provide a flexible work arrangement allows folks to be able to, better support themselves and take care of themselves while they're also working. We also recognize that we have folks who've been here for a long time and who are retiring. There are also folks that will leave the county for various reasons. We have turnover and we need to attract new employees. And recently, remote work is becoming so ubiquitous and people are seeing the benefits. So, if we're not offering remote or flexible schedules for folks, we're going to have a hard time attracting and retaining employees. We've also seen that employees are just as effective working from home as they are in the office, and in many cases actually more effective working from home than in the office. Lower levels of stress, overall sort of better quality of life. And so we want that for our staff. And it helps folks as well who don't have access to childcare, or maybe it's difficult or don't have the funds or something like that. People can stay home and take care of their kids at the same time. In terms of where we might recommend or something like that employees look at when they're looking to do sort of hybrid or remote situations. One of those would be to ensure that the folks who actually do have to go into the office have sustainable commute options available to them. So obviously Get There Oregon is great. They have their resources for folks to be able to plan their trips and to find carpools. We, as the sustainability division, help to spread the word about that to folks. We have an email that goes out to all of our new hires that shows all of our transportation options. So we want to make sure that the people who are going in there can get there and know how to get there. We also give folks free TriMet hot passes. So that's something to consider. But then to also consider the needs of the folks who are working at home. So I only have my laptop here, for example. that works for me, but that definitely doesn't work for everybody. People might need extra monitors. We, for example, offer like ergonomic assessments where people can actually get their home office evaluated to see, okay, do you need to adjust your table to a certain height and your chair to a certain height so you don't end up with back problems and things like that. So kind of just asking folks in a very general sense, if you're in the office, what do you need? How can we help you get there? If you're at home, what do we need to make your experience better? And you know, that seems to be working well for us and could be some helpful tips and tricks for all of you as well.
Great, thanks, Eric. Cassie, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, sure. And I think what Eric just described sounds great. And I second a lot of what he said. I think that, you know, we're also focusing on a lot of those things. I think, you know, but in terms of what's driving our decision to offer flexible work, it's definitely a decision around attraction and retention and, you know, keeping and attracting employees, just because that is what people want. And so I'd say that's the primary driver for us is the ability to compete for talent. And then in terms of critical focus areas, I think, you know, there's a couple things. One is to be inclusive and think inclusively about, you know, how the work gets done. So, and to be intentional too. So for example, because we have this hybrid workforce now, you know, oftentimes something as simple as a meeting will have a mixture of people who are in the office in a conference room together or calling in from their home office, maybe even calling in from the road, you know, it varies. And so we've really taken the time to be really intentional about how we set up meetings and things like that, and how we conduct ourselves and interact in the meetings. And so everyone, for example, you know, we make sure that everybody is on camera and everyone can see each other's faces. You know, we use collaboration tools that are online. And so everybody in the meeting has the ability to contribute to the meeting and, you know, collaborate. So things like one of the softwares that we use is called Mural. And so it's like a whiteboarding exercise. Things like that. I think the other thing, you know, I will say that our leadership still would like to see people coming into the office, even though, you know, we do offer people to choose their own, you know, work structure. And so we're still focused on how to make coming into the office attractive to people. So we've got fitness classes going again on kind of those core days that people are coming in. We're having parties. There's one this afternoon. So we're having a party out on the patio, and things like that. And so, you know, and then the third thing I wanted to mention was kind of the silver lining around this has been, you know, the connectivity it's created across the company. So we've always been a very in-person connected culture, but because we've been forced into this environment where we're connecting virtually, there's been, you know, lots of different opportunities to connect with employees across the globe. And so the company has started to provide those opportunities, whether it be, you know, gathering at lunch virtually and connecting. Like I connected with a store leader in Chicago that I'd never met. And we had a really great conversation over Teams because we were in this virtual room together. And so I think that not only, you know, is that great for me, but it's great for him because he feels more connected to the company. And so I think it's really, you know, while we're trying to make coming to the office attractive and connect people who are here, I think connecting people across the entire workforce is another thing to be really intentional about and thinking about the tools and the ways that you do that.
Yeah, thanks, Cassie. That's really it. Yeah, that silver lining of being able to make that connectivity outside of the local geography.
Yep.
So Dave, turn it over to you for this question.
Well, I'd say I appreciate all the things the other panelists said, and we have a lot in common. A couple of little details I might mention that might be worth thinking about. We made a conscious decision that each person, well, of those 2/3 of the people who are flexible, we said you've got a choice. If you want to be in the office 3 days a week or more, you can have a dedicated office or cubicle in the building with your own setup and everything there. If you're less than 3 days, we'll set you up at home, but we won't do both. So they had to decide one way or the other. If they have the home, if they've taken the less than 3 days option, we have some flexible offices that they can move into for the day. And, it's got a monitor, it's got a phone, and a very comfortable place, but it's not their office, it's a shared office. And I think that's working pretty well. Cassie brought up the concept of hybrid meetings, and I think that's a real challenge. And we haven't, frankly, figured out how to do that. We have to be conscious that there's a tendency for the people who aren't in the room to be left out and not feel included and not being heard. Some of our departments have taken the following posture. This is smaller groups say it. They've taken the rule: if more than one person is not going to be in the room, then everyone's going to be remote, even if they're all in the same building, except one or two people. They all sit in their offices and are virtual, just to make it more even. I'm not sure we have to go to that extreme, but it's going to be interesting how this all sorts out. And I know there's some special cameras that automatically detect who's talking and point the camera to it. We haven't gotten those yet, but that's going to be an interesting challenge, I think. And why did we do this? Why are we offering hybrid work opportunities and remote opportunities? Because we wouldn't have any new employees if we didn't.
Yeah, that's a great summary to kind of end that on, Dave. Yeah, I think that's a great way of phrasing it. Yeah, I've got to do it to be competitive now. So let's see. Switch to the next question here, and Cassie, we'll kick this off with you, and I think you touched on some of this already in your previous answer. So I think it'll make a nice segue. The practices and policies that support that connectivity between employees and employee performance are crucial to a business's success. So how can employers factor people, technology, and place into those remote work models to meet those performance goals? And then, because there's been studies that have shown that unpleasant commutes negatively impact employee wellness and performance, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that have emerged around reducing employees' solo auto commute trips?
Sure. So the first bullet there, that's a big question. So I'm going to try to just distill it and make it simple. I think, I talked about in my last answer about being intentional, and I think, what we've done, especially here, just in my own area of HR, is just laid ground rules about how meetings happen. And so there's that agreement and kind of intentionality behind it. So we're not just like scheduling a meeting and showing up and hoping it all works out, right? We've got, and I'm not saying it's perfect, like Dave was saying, like there's improvements. Yes, we have not perfected this yet, but we are working to really be not only intentional in how, like we all bring our laptop to a meeting, we all sign in, so our faces are there, but also like meeting hygiene and making sure that, when we're having meetings that they are, they need to happen. There's an agenda, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then again, I mentioned that we have making sure that we do things like we'll have breakout sessions and meetings so that people can collaborate and brainstorm. And so we have Teams has the functionality where you can, create breakout rooms for the people who are remote, and then the people in the room might break out into different breakout groups. And then we have, the software that allows you to collaborate. So just really leveraging those things. I think a lot of the the things that I'm talking about, some of the things we had in place prior to the pandemic, we just didn't use them. And so we're leveraging technology that exists and then figuring out, what we need to invest in to improve things. And then in terms of opportunities around reducing solo auto commute trips, this is definitely, I'm very curious to hear what Dave and Eric have to say about this, because this is something that, we're still in the process of getting people back to the office and figuring that out. I don't know. I think like the big challenge for us is that flexibility. So the reason that, we're offering this hybrid work environment is because they want flexibility, they want work-life integration. And so you have situations where people, they might start their morning off at home with some meetings and then come into the office after, and they have a 30-minute window to get into the office. But if they were to take public transit, it would take them 45 minutes to an hour to get to the office. And by the way, I'm describing my own situation here. This is me. So, coming in to the office via the Max or the bus is not an option on days like that. And most of my days are like that. And then I know that we have a lot of employees who, even before, current times, they need the flexibility to go pick up their kids. And, so I think like that is the biggest challenge, and just creating awareness and making, things like taking public transit, riding into work, or carpooling more accessible and kind of turnkey, and showing people how to do it. I think that's the big opportunity for us, and what I'd like to see us kind of focus on once we're a little bit further along in this return into the office phase that we're in.
Thanks, Cassie. Those are some great thoughts. So maybe Dave, we'll turn this over to you next.
Well, I'll say some things about public transit because it's a real interest area for me. We bought our building, which is right next to a Max station, Milliken Way Max station, mostly because it was right next to the Milliken Way Max station. And we loved the building. And we before the pandemic, for 20 years, everyone in the company had free TriMet passes. And we promoted the heck out of using the Max because it was so easy with the station right by our office. That's kind of gone now. Didn't make sense to, the passport thing, you have to buy a ticket for every single employee or not. So that program didn't make any sense with most of the people not even coming to work. So we have a new sort of emergency program where if you take the public transit X days a month, and I don't remember what X is, I think it's something like equivalent of a couple times a week, or maybe 3 times a week, we'll pay for your monthly pass. And it's on an honor system. And we have a few people doing that, but it's nothing like the old days. And I guess it never will be. The other, as I said, I see pros and cons. We're certainly using less energy getting people to work, and people are wasting less time coming to work. But the other thing that I really worry about is, can our public transportation system survive? Are there enough people that are going to ride public transit, to make them viable for the city? And we certainly need them. And, ridership is down. That makes it tougher to justify expenditures on things like new Max lines and stuff. So anyway, just some thoughts there.
No, Dave, I think that's a really good kind of big picture thought about, future of transit and what does it all mean? Just the whole future of the system. So Eric, your thoughts on this question.
Yes. So, gosh, there's so much I want to say about this. I think on the county level, we've kind of left it up to departments and divisions, and particularly the managers of those departments and divisions, to make the call about how what the best mix is of remote versus hybrid versus fully in-person work. there are some, obviously, like we said before, like the sheriff's patrol deputies, like they are cut and dry. You need to be there all the time. But there are some departments who have decided, okay, actually, it's going to be best for our team to be in twice a week. So come in on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we can all collaborate together, but then Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're from home. In the case of my division, we have, and in the case of many others that are really leaning into this sort of remote work situation, our managers have basically let us create our own plans. So one of my coworkers, for example, she has like certain commitments in the afternoons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So she will go into the office. Her plan is in the mornings, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then we'll be remote the rest of the time. So she can be home at, in the afternoon when she has those commitments. I personally just like an ad hoc approach where I go in as needed and my default location is home. And so that's sort of a way that we've been able to, factor the human element into it, is to, in the best possible scenario, let staff actually be the drivers of what they do and where they work. Some challenges that we see reflective, I think, a lot of what Dave was just talking about. I mean, it's difficult for folks to take sustainable transportation options to the office, and that was the case even before the pandemic. And not because folks don't want to necessarily, but our neighborhoods weren't designed for it. If you don't have a train or a bus that's right outside your house like I do, it's going to be really difficult. Or if you live in Gresham and you need to commute to Hillsborough, that's a 2-hour trip on transit. Like that's not super reasonable for a lot of folks. So we still face a lot of those same challenges as we did before. But the thing that we can do in that regard, which we didn't get to do before, was really push the telework. While it is, at the end of the day, up to managers in a lot of places to decide how, where folks live, or not where they live, where they work, we can at least promote that as a climate positive strategy. We talk about how it's much less stressful to take transit. You could read a book, you could take a nap, you could listen to a podcast. And the folks who have tried it out have really enjoyed it. So in that sense, it's an opportunity because it gives us a new avenue to reduce the amount of especially drive alone trips. We used to be 77% of county employees used to drive alone to work every day before the pandemic. And we're going to be doing our next eco survey, which I think is Oregon Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, I forget. But the eco survey in September. So we're going to get our first really good set of kind of post-pandemic data about how many people are actually coming in and what modes are they taking. So we're very much looking forward to that.
Great, thanks, Eric. Okay, so our last question here that we have pre-planned. So just in thinking about the future of work, do you see will flexible work models continue to be a top consideration and priority? And then do you have expectations for how employee commutes might continue to evolve in the future and how organizations may need to respond? I think we've touched on a little bit of this already, but maybe just adding anything that's come to mind. And Dave, maybe we'll kick this one off with you.
Well, I think flexible work is here to stay, and we'll just have to learn to work with it better. On the commuting side of things, I don't know what to say. I do worry a bit about how that's going to go. So I guess I don't have any special insights there. I'll defer to the other panelists.
All right, thanks, Dave. Cassie, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think flexible work is here to stay. It's not going away. And the second part, when I think about employee commutes, I go back to our workforce that has to be on site. So I'm thinking about, we still have thousands of employees who go to retail stores or to our distribution centers, or here, even on our corporate campus, we have a customer care center that employees, they work from the customer care center. And so still thinking about those employees who do have to be on site and how we can promote, commute options to them, make it fun, make it turnkey for them. I don't know that, I think that it would be more challenging with the hybrid workforce just because of the flexibility they're already looking for. And yeah, I think while it's, all is not lost, I think I would, if I were to focus on this, I would focus on our employees who are actually coming to the work site on a daily basis.
Thanks. How about you, Eric?
I echo both Dave and Cassie. It's here to stay. Like I mentioned before, it's codified now in county policy, so it's a permanent fixture for us. And we think as folks get more adjusted to it and the technology gets better, we see it just even growing from this point. We see maybe potential for some positions to be full-time permanent remote, like with no office at all. That could be in our future, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Something also that we've been given direction to do by the Board of County Commissioners is to start a community-facing climate action plan. Our sustainability work here has been almost entirely internally focused for the last 12 years since we formed, but we're going to start working with the community on greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And I'm sure a lot of us in the room know that transportation is the largest single source of emissions in our community. So the more that we can help not only our staff, but community members also and businesses help their staff commute or do teleworking so that they don't have to drive, that's going to be a huge player in us reducing our carbon emissions for the community. And in terms of just expectations for how we might continue to evolve in the future, we're going to continue to do our outreach, and we want to make sure that folks are taking the most sustainable options they can. And then as well as, it's not ideal in a lot of senses, but electric vehicles as well. I mean, they don't do anything to really reduce noise on the road and things like that, or reduce traffic, but they do clean up the air and they are greener than driving alone. So for those folks who maybe don't live in those areas that have easy access to transit and biking and walking, they could take an EV, drive it to the county, and be able to charge their vehicle while they're here. So that's kind of where we're looking.
Great, thanks for that. And I know it's always tricky to ask about predicting what the future will bring, because 3.5 years ago, who would have guessed that we'd be here now? So very unpredictable to do that. So I think at this point we can open it up to questions that have been submitted from attendees. So if you haven't had the chance already and you've got a question in mind, you can use the Q&A feature to submit your questions there. And so I think I've seen some things coming in, but I'm going to ask for a little help on this one. So do we have any questions in there that are waiting?
Yes, there is a question actually that Cassie answered, but perhaps Eric and Dave could talk about. It was whether or not employees were able to use their passes was it just for work, like when they provide transit passes, or is it something they can use anytime for any kind of trip?
For us, it is anytime, work or leisure, as many times as you want. I use mine all the time, like almost every day to go all over the place. So we try and promote that as well, even if it's just not. People like to think it's just for commuting, but it's not. At least for us, we can use it anywhere.
Same here.
Okay, we have another open question about HR policies. Do you have any advice for developing remote work HR policies?
I think I'm the HR person. I don't know if Eric, if you're in HR. So I'll start. Well, I would say, gosh, there's so many layers to getting support and developing HR policies. I think, when I think back to when we were first, trying to develop the flexible work policy before the pandemic, and other policies that I've put in place, I think, really being collaborative about it and making sure that you're taking, getting voices from not only employees, but different parts of your business, so that, you've got not only buy-in, but when you're designing the policy, you've got different voices represented in how the policy lays out. And then in terms of if you're still in the phase where you're trying to get leadership buy-in on the policy, I have always just found that kind of building the business case is a great way to do that. And so, knowing what your leadership cares about, and then kind of answering those questions through a business case, whether it be, for us, it's typically things that are related to attraction and retention. So looking at, what other companies are doing to attract and retain, what best practices are, and then, what the return, if there's a return on investment in the policy, what that might look like.
Yeah, and I'm not the HR person. I don't know really how the policies were developed per se, but since we are the county, everything that we have, all of our policies are open to the public. Is there a good place for me to copy and paste a link? Would that be in the Q&A spot?
I think in that case, you could probably put that in the chat. I think that would be.
Are the participants going to see it in the chat?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right, mine only says host and panelists, but I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I'll put it in there.
Send it to me and I'll drop it in. I'll get it to everyone. Thanks.
Yeah, so it has both our policies and then our procedures and forms on there. So if you're looking for ideas for any of your policies, feel free to steal whatever you want from the county.
Thanks, Eric.
There was a question in the Q&A about that I might answer online here if you don't mind. The person asked if we were going to limit our remote work to have people within a certain travel time to the office, or would we consider a fully remote worker who, for example, lives in Albuquerque or Key West? The answer is we've done it. We've bought with software developers. We've taken the move, and so the assumption now is we'll take a software developer anywhere in the world. I think that we would like to have them kind of commit to come into the office once a year for like a company party or a company meeting, and so we at least get to know them a little bit. But that ship has left the train has left the station as far as we're concerned. There was a time when we would have said we want them to be within a reasonable driving distance of the office so they could come in for weekly meetings and stuff. But that's not the case for us anymore.
Ditto.
We actually have a restriction on where folks can work, and it is a 90-minute drive from the county office. I have my personal opinions about that I will refrain from sharing. It has its pros and cons, I think, but that's ours. So you could theoretically, that we have staff that live in Tillamook. That's within 90 minutes. People will have, they'll go up to government camp in the wintertime and things like that and work from there, but you couldn't go to Bend, or you couldn't go to Albuquerque or Key West or Paris or anywhere like that.
We have another question for the group in the Q&A. What are you doing to build employee connectivity and organizational culture among your distributed workforce?
I can step in a little bit on that. I talked about this a little bit with the virtual stuff that we're offering. I think I'll just be really specific. One thing that has been really awesome is our employee resource groups. So we have various employee resource groups that are on a variety, so we have like a employee resource group for Asian employees, for our Asian Pacific Islander. We have a Black employee network, a Pride group, a women's leadership group, a veterans group. And so they're very, very active, and they are constantly putting on virtual and in-person events that you can attend. And I have I've attended them personally and have just felt so connected to people who are even, in other countries during, and certainly in other parts of the business during these events. And so I think that's a really specific thing, but something that I've found personally impactful. It's just enabling and empowering our ERGs to kind of be connectivity points for the company.
I'll echo that. We're actually in the development of an official employee resource group policy. So we have a bunch of groups that are kind of informal, but that meet all the time. I am the coordinator of one, which is our Spanish conversation group. So for anyone who is either a native speaker or is learning Spanish, we just get together every other week during lunch and we speak Spanish, and it's a great time. That was really, especially for me who came on during the pandemic and really has not gotten to meet anyone in person. That's been the primary way through which I've gotten to meet people and build legit relationships with. I mean, we just talk about life and random things, you know, so it's a nice way to connect that way. And then as the sustainability education coordinator, we used to do all of our events in person, but we've shifted that to online. And it's actually been a really great way to keep employees engaged, because it doesn't matter where you're working. You don't have to come in from another office. You don't have to even just take time to walk from your own office to wherever we were going. Like, you can just click a button, you're there on Teams. We do fun games, interactive, you know, polls and quizzes, and we bring in panels, and we've seen a huge uptick in participation. So just leaning into that virtual space. I think a lot of us think about the virtual space being a hindrance, but it can also be a really great tool to connect folks who might not have otherwise gotten to connect.
Eric, I think that's a great point, and I think looking at the time, I think maybe that's a great kind of wrap up and on that. So appreciate that. I'm just going to finish up here. Remind folks that are attending of some additional resources that are out there to support businesses. So there's the Get There Oregon Employer Resource page, web page. You can also email the info at getthereoregon.org, or can't help but plug, if you're in Washington County, you can also email WTA at WTA-TMA.org. You can also check the LinkedIn page there if you like that platform, the Get There Oregon page, and I believe all of those are being put into the chat too, so that you'll have access to those. This webinar is one of a continuing series that's been happening throughout the year. The next webinar in the series is coming in September. You see the theme there will be about commutes that support worker well-being. So a nice continuation, I think, of some of the conversations that have happened here today. Stay tuned for more details on that on the Get There Oregon webinar page. And so I just want to wrap up by saying thanks to everyone that joined us and attended today. Special thanks to our panelists. I really appreciate your time and expertise and energy on this topic. And so thanks for being here, and thanks for all that you do. And we hope to see you at the next Get There Oregon webinar in September.